address this important issue. Today is kind of confusing because we all know the stereotypes that straddle the shoulders of black men and boys. But in my office, I have a great gentleman who has joined us, Dr. Woodman, and he has been doing lots of research on black men and boys. And he found a study that said that black fathers are more consistent with their children in daily life than other fathers. So my ears perked up, and I said, let me read that for myself, because I was buying into the stereotype. But if you really think about it, and you go in the mall, and you see black men with children, they're holding their hand, they're helping them pick out the clothes, they are paying attention to those children. The family gatherings, that black father brings his children, he's very attentive. And I live in a very integrated community. My next door neighbor is a rabbi, and the people across the street are Haitian Americans. So all of these different kinds of people live in my community. And the only fathers I see outside playing basketball and football with their children are black fathers. So then I began to put two and two together, and I said, you know what? We have allowed our daddies, our fathers, to be put in a little square and have said that they are deadbeat dads. They're no good. We don't need them. Women are strong. They can raise their own children. And it's time for us to change that narrative. And I'm so pleased that all of you are here today to help us do that. So we have members of the Congressional Black Caucus seated on the front row that we're going to induct as role models today. We have a picture that we sent out with the first class of role models, and as I counted, 4 of them passed away, and 7 did not return, so we have 11 that are missing. So we're going to be inducting the new ones. In addition, I want to thank the members of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Would you please stand? Let us welcome them. They have an and as I was saying to them, my husband was an Omega, he's deceased. My son is an Omega, and my son-in-law is an Omega. So I'm all purple and gold. I should have that on today, but I call myself dressing for the role models program today. So before we move any further, I'm going to call up my good friend, who I have known, I knew before I even came to Congress, Mr. Clyburn, who all of you know. Were not for Mr. Clyburn, Mr. Biden would not be the president. Great big hand. Into the role models many years ago. 5,000 Role Models is an organization that I founded in my elementary school. And what happened was, when I was a teacher, I only taught in schools where there were black children. And during that time, you could paddle. So they had these little black boys that were bad. They were bad little boys, and they used to paddle them. And I didn't really like that, but that's how they, found that was the best thing for them. And then when I became a principal, I had a school that was 1/3 African American, 1/3 Anglo, and 1/3 Hispanic. And for some reason, that little black boy stuck out like a sore thumb. I couldn't believe how terrible they were. They were bused to the school for immigration purposes. So every morning I would stand at the door and wait for them to come to school so I could give them a big hug so that they could behave, so they could promise me that they were going to behave, but they didn't. So I said, some mornings I would wake up and I wouldn't even want to go to school because I knew I would have to deal with them. And so I said, God said to me, Frederica, if that's how you feel about these boys, how do you think your white teachers feel about them and your other teachers feel about them? So I began to pray and I said, I've got to do something with these boys. So I'm from Miami, so all of the men who went to, boys who went to high school with me, they're still there. I know them. I called them up. I said, I have these bad little boys in my school. I said, I want you to come and help me with them. And so I called my sorority sisters' husbands and my link sisters' husbands and everybody. I said, come. And then I brought the men into the school and I put them on the little boys on long sleeve white shirts and a tie. I put them on a bus and took them to a little conference, just like they were little men. And when they came back, they changed. Right before my eyes, they changed. They started doing their homework and they would always ask me, Miss Wilson, when are the men coming back? And I said, oh, they'll be back next week because I told them that all of you made straight A's on your spelling. And that's all they wanted. That's all they wanted, and they changed. And when we put those little ties on them and those little shirts, I said, now you look up in the sky, and because you are somebody, and you hold your nose up in the air, and that's what they would do. That's what they would do. So then when I was elected to the school board, I started the program all across Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and now it's all across Florida, it's in Detroit, Michigan, and it's in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we have to reach down, pull up, and help our young boys to be good men. And I always say, when a little baby is born, I'm all about prevention, so you could call me Frederica Prevention Wilson. I'm not into criminal justice and all of these other things. I am prevention. When a little baby is born and they bring the baby to the mother, they say, Miss Wilson, it's a boy. They don't say, Miss Wilson, it's a murderer. So what do you think happens to that beautiful baby boy that Miss Wilson had by the time he gets to be 14 years old? He has the audacity to pick up a gun and shoot somebody and rain terror across our communities. What happens to him? Why aren't we saying, what does he need? Does he need sneakers? Does he need a mentor? Does he need a job? Does he need clothes? Does he need food? Does he need a place to stay? What does he need? Why are we not doing that as black men and boys, as black women? Why are we're not asking that? Why are we so ready to just stop right there and let him cross over, and then we want to give $35 to $40 a day to keep him in the criminal justice system when we could have invested $35. And in the program, we take our big boys to the prison and we take our little boys to the jail. But then they take college tours so they can see the difference when you make the right choices. And what just floored me, one day a little boy looked at me and said, when I took him into the jail, he was 9 years old. And he said, Miss Wilson, where's the jail for white people? And I said, it's the same jail. He said, oh, I thought they might have had a separate jail because I don't see them. So then I said, that's because they have lawyers on, they get out, they're waiting on their trial. I said, that's why you don't see any, so that's why you have to make sure that you keep yourself straight. He said, oh, I understand. So there's a lot for us to do, and I commend Omega Psi Phi for reaching out and strengthening fathers. And I commend the men of the Congressional Black Caucus for coming today to be inducted. But before I induct you, and before we honor the fathers that are present, I'm going to ask that our great Jim Clyburn come and greet us today. Jim Clyburn.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Frederica. You know, here in the Congress, when we hear comments given and you don't think you can improve upon them, you just move to associate yourself with those remarks and sit down. Frederica has been beating up on me for the last couple of weeks about making sure that I come here today, and I'm sandwiching this between other obligations that I have. One having to do with the opening of the International African American Museum in Charleston on tomorrow evening, which I've got to get prepared for, because I'm giving the remarks on Saturday morning. So I'm not going to be able to stay for the duration. But let me say to my colleagues who are here, thank you so much for showing up at an event that's being co-sponsored by my Omega brothers. We welcome all, even those who make little mistakes in their lives. We can help you work on that, Jonathan and Troy. But let me just say this. I spoke yesterday at the headquarters of the Coast Guard. They were celebrating Juneteenth, though that was on Monday. And I said to them that Juneteenth, to me, is a commemoration and an informative event of what catastrophic events can occur if you fail to communicate. Juneteenth is all about the faith to communicate. The Emancipation Proclamation, the second one, was effective on January 1, 1863. Those 4,000 enslaved Americans in Texas, at this particular plantation, did not get the word until 2 years and 6 months later. Nobody communicated. And as a result of that absence of communication, they spent 2.5 years, additional 2.5 years in slavery. This Fatherhood initiative is all about what can flow or possibly make when we communicate. I'm a father of 3 magnificent women, and they are women. I'm old enough for my youngest to soon be 50. And so I know how communication works. Those 3 daughters of mine, there's not a day that goes by when I don't talk to them. And I'm not asking them, even when I don't want to know their advice. I ask them anyway. And sometimes I have to explain to them later why I did not follow their advice. So I don't talk to them because I need their direction. I talk to them because I need their communication. There's a difference. That's what this initiative is all about. Communicating with young men and boys over what's going on with them. How do we really know how to help direct their lives if we don't have a line of communication that allow us to understand what it is they're thinking and what they're feeling. And I know a little bit about that. My late wife and I were married for 58 years before she lost her battle to diabetes. During that 6 to 8 year period, I learned something. I learned it within the first 6 months. And that was, I had to learn how to respect her background, her experiences, and how to make adjustments for the differences that exist between hers and mine. And that's what this experience is all about. Us learning how and when and why to make adjustments in our thinking as well as our actions. And so I commend Frederica. Frederica and I went to Africa together, to Ghana, to celebrate the 400th anniversary of great passage of the customs of African Americans in this country. And while we were there, we went to a meeting. I don't remember exactly what the meeting was about, but I was sitting next to Frederica, and all of a sudden, I felt, I didn't know she was that strong, hitting me on my shoulder. And she had just seen one of the people who was there to sort of welcome us to that embassy in Ghana, was wearing his 5,000 role model tie.
That's right.
And I don't know what it did for him, but I know what it did for her. That young man had graduated from her program in Miami. Here he is at the embassy in Ghana, welcoming the Congressional delegation, wearing his 5,000 role models tie. I wondered to myself, and I may have said this to Frederica, I just really believe that but for that experience in her program, in Miami, in the communities within, that young man F showing up on the staff of the American Embassy in Ghana. All about us learning to communicate, learning to respect, and learning to make the adjustments that are necessary to be successful. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank my neighbor brothers for partnering with Frederica on this great effort. And there is something to be said for y'all, from Alphas, from Kappas, from Sigmas, not to mention the sororities, and from we all who are willing and soon to become omegas. Thank you so much. Well, y'all can get inducted. Well, I've been inducted. In fact, I think I've been inducted more than once.
I think so. That was closet full of time. Role model Reggie? Yeah, ready? Then first recognize Representative Sykes. Stand up, Representative Sykes. We also have Commissioner Martin, who represents Health and Human Services. Stand up, Commissioner Martin. Okay, at this time, we're going to ask Representative Troy from Louisiana.
Yep.
Come on up. And this is Representative Jonathan Jackson. It's Jesse Jackson boy. And in front of Councilman Reggie. Yeah, the pledge. And I'm gonna need, Vince, would you please come forward? Yes. Join, we're gonna induct you also.
Yes.
Gentlemen, mentors, on this special rare occasion, we're called upon to take the oath and a pledge. And this is one of those special occasions that we're about to do right now. So I ask that you please raise your right hand.
You wanna come and stand in the mic? Come and stand here and let them face you.
You can turn on. Sir, could you please raise your right hand? And please repeat after me. I do solemnly pledge
I solemnly pledge
that upon this mission
that upon this mission
of 5,000 role models of excellence,
of 5,000 role models for excellence,
by intervening in the life of at-risk youth,
by intervening in the life of at-risk youth,
I accept God's given responsibilities
I accept God's given responsibilities
of serving as a role model,
of serving as a role model,
as striving and fulfilling our goals,
striving and fulfilling our goals,
of guiding our young boys into manhood.
of guiding our young boys into manhood.
And congratulations, role model. And please turn around and receive the crowd.
You all move down. Take a picture. Where is Darren and Jean? Can you come and help with the time? Take it off when you get out, you gotta put it on in here. I'm gonna ask the local Baptist, please come forward. I'm gonna make this high five to stand with us and also the Vice Gospel National. Come stand with us. Well, come on, Maxwell. Are you in it? Just give like Gen Z order. We need another time.
Yep, we're bringing it.
Can I get everybody to be a little bit closer, a little bit tighter?
You want to raise your right hand?
You want to deliver the pledge? Do I want to be inducted? Raise your hand. Okay. Reggie, go to the mic.
You ready in?
Wasn't in the plan.
Didn't I tell you what? You don't want to use that. I said, put it in, you don't have to start. Take off your tie. The right hand of fellowship. He told me I told him, they asked me why I had a red tie. He said, can you come out that time? In a couple hours. He said, why you have that red tie? I said, don't worry. I'm gonna have all the kids in my house. We gotta work out. Let's think about all the great things we can do with these young men.
Squeeze in a little bit more so we can fit in one frame. Squeeze in a little bit more. All right, so it's going to be right here first. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay. Right here. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. More.
Okay, gentlemen, please raise your right hand. Everybody get re-sworn in. I do solemnly pledge.
I solemnly pledge
That I will uphold the mission.
that I will uphold the mission
Of the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project.
of the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project
By intervening in the life of at-risk youth.
by intervening in the life of at-risk youth.
I accept my God-given responsibility.
I accept my God-given responsibility
Of serving as a role model.
of serving as a role model
As we strive for fulfillment of our goals.
as we strive for fulfillment of our goals
Of guiding young boys into manhood.
of guiding young boys into manhood.
Welcome to the 5,000 Role Models program.
We're gonna have to get everyone's name before you leave. Please state your names and Reggie. Now, I want call to the podium the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Mr. Steve Horseman, who will bring the greeting. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be with you. Congratulations to the new initiates. I went through my initiation in Miami in Representative Frederica Wilson's district during one of the 5,000 role models of success events that they had there. I want to first congratulate and thank Congresswoman Wilson for your vision and your life of career on behalf of black boys and black girls, and everything that you have done as an educator, as a leader, and as a member of Congress to make sure that we stay true to our young people. And for bringing the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys to life here in Washington, D.C. It's because of Congresswoman Wilson that we have this Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. She made it a legislative priority along with the Congressional Black Caucus, and because of that, it is now law. There is now funding and budgets and resources and the ability to do things that we have not been able to do for our young boys for a long time. But your vision and your passion for the success of black men and boys has enabled us to enact at the federal level and to codify this commission to make sure it has the financial resources needed to deliver for our black men and boys. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. I just want to say thank you also to the members of Congress who are here and those that went through this process. As a father of three myself, I know how important it is to not only, raise your children, but to also give them the love, the support, and the guidance that they need. I lost my father to gun violence when I was 19 years old. He was shot and killed when I was a freshman in college, and so that has always impacted who I am and what I've become, but it also has made me feel even more committed to making sure that we do everything that we can to protect our black boys and to let them know that they are loved, that they matter, and that they have a purpose within them that must be fulfilled. We are an example. We are the first example at home of what a man is, how to act, how to speak, how to dress, and most importantly, how to love. Fatherhood is a beautiful journey. It's not always easy, but it is a beautiful journey to help raise young black men and black girls. I have a daughter, but it is the most rewarding title that we can also have in raising kings that will one day go on to do amazing things. To my D9 brothers that are here today, and of course to the members of Omega Psi Fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, thank you for your partnership today with Representative Wilson. I know that this event is also meant to celebrate fathers in the Congressional Black Caucus. But while we may be celebrating fathers in the CBC, we know we are celebrating fathers all across the country. Stepfathers, godfathers, coaches, uncles, and anyone else that assumes the father figure role that our young boys require and deserve. As has been said, it takes a village, and I am proud of the work that this commission is doing, and Representative Wilson knows she has the full commitment and support of the Congressional Black Caucus in making sure that we fulfill this mission and the work that you and others have set before us. So thank you for allowing us to participate. Congratulations. I'm glad to see my brother Troy Carter also, donning one of these new bright red ties. It's the only tie that's red in my closet. He's got a whole lot of red, so he's used to it. For the rest of us, it's going to take a little getting used to. But thank you all very, very much for being here today.
this way in.
Oh, okay.
Come on.
I'm gonna wait till you get your.
Yeah, I can only do one thing at a time. I'm following Max, whatever Max tells me
Come
to
on,
do
y'all,
here.
come on. Let the chairman on the carpet.
Gentlemen, how you doing? Hey, I know you.
Reggie. Wait a minute, on that.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
All right, yes, ma'am. What's the school teacher, all the school teacher? Just say yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. What do you think we'll do?
We're gonna get in the photo.
Ah, okay.
3 times?
We standing here, you get.
Where's Max?
Can I throw him a? Somebody out there.
Mr. Mfume, please raise your right hand
Yes, indeed.
and repeat after me.
Uh-huh.
I do solemnly pledge
I do solemnly pledge
that I will uphold the mission
that I will uphold the mission
of the 5,000 role models
of the 5,000 role models
of Excellence Project
of Excellence Project
by intervening in the lives of at-risk youth.
by intervening in the lives of at-risk youth.
I accept my God-given responsibility
I accept my God-given responsibility
of serving as a role model
of serving as a role model
as we strive to fulfill our goal
as we strive to fulfill our goal
of guiding our young boys into manhood.
of guiding our young boys into manhood.
Congratulations. Please proceed through the receiving line and shake the hands of your fellow role models.
And I did graduation. Thank you for your leadership, man.
Thank you so much. Hey, man, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, they're taking us to the floor, so we're leaving to go to the floor.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have the, Prime Minister,
Indian.
India here today. And, so, quite a sacrifice to come, but then we're doing a joint session. So that's why we're interrupting everything and coming in and out. So thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Wilson. Let's give her another round of applause. I'm gonna move quickly now. We're gonna have a panel to discuss these issues as we addressed earlier. I'm gonna ask the panelists to come forward as I begin to read their introductions, their biographies, and introduce them each to one of you. So if you all would join me here at the front, at the seat where you are supposed to be. So just a detour for Brother Jackson, where is Brother Jackson? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Why don't you come before we start the panel to give your remarks on the program first, and then we'll get into it. So we'll have to take a break.
This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. Good afternoon, everyone. To Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, thank you for your visionary leadership and your service to our nation. And of course, the men of Omega here, we thank you for this invitation to participate in this very important discussion. To my Omega man, Brother James Clyburn that left here, he is our 2021 recipient of the Omega Lifetime Achievement Award, which is the highest award that can be bestowed upon a brother. And so we really appreciate our brother. Brother Mfume, I want to recognize you as well, great Omega man out there. To all of our distinguished panelists, Omega men and honored guests. My name is Mark Jackson. I am the first Vice Grand Basileus of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, a fancy way of saying I'm our international vice president. And on behalf of Brother Ricky Lawrence Lewis, our 42nd Grand Basileus of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, I bring you greetings. Upon being elected to the office of Grand Basileus at the 83rd Grand Conclave, Brother Grand Lewis announced to the body that his #1 priority would be fatherhood and mentoring. Grounded with a sense of purpose and rooted in the belief that our cause was just, the men of Omega said, if not now, then when? If not us, then who? Who will lead the charge and stand in the gap to support black fathers and mentoring? I am extremely happy to report by an overwhelming majority of the membership during our national convention, it was recommended and approved to make fatherhood and mentoring a nationally mandated program. So what does that mean? I'm glad you asked. Picture this. Omega men around the world with over 750 chapters on 5 continents, 16 countries, across 19 time zones, all actively engaged in fatherhood and mentoring. Just picture that. Let me be clear though, fatherhood and mentoring isn't new to Omega. So how do we get here? I'm glad you asked. Historically, as a fraternal organization, we were engaged in mentoring efforts for years before we took up the mantle of fatherhood and mentoring. As a result of several meetings with fatherhood and mentoring leaders at the White House during President Obama's administration, a request was made by the president to join him in a fatherhood and mentoring partnership. Our very own Brother Tabiti Boone and Brother Fairchild brought this recommendation back to the fraternity. We worked tirelessly at every level of the fraternity to get the program approved. The program was developed and implemented around the country. In the fraternity's partnership with President Obama, it supported the president's 4 pillars. Change the conversation on fatherhood, change the narrative and societal perception about fathers. 2, community partnerships. The fraternity worked with President on the need for community organizations, institutions, and agencies to form working partnerships, uplifting the needs of the fathers. Advocacy and funding support, one of the main efforts of the President's initiative, to address the importance of policies that are in the best interest of fathers, eliminating barriers, keeping fathers connected and involved in the lives of their children. And of course, the celebration of fathers. President Obama's initiative was a push for programs that acknowledge the positive fathers play in their role in the lives of their children. And by the way, just the other day, last Sunday during Father's Day, our Omega program, our annual Father's Day program aired on YouTube, and we had, I think up there now we have like 5,000 viewership. And so we do that every year. We celebrate and honor our fathers. Additionally, Omega Psi Phi has pushed and supported policies that support fathers. Criminal justice reform policies that provide incarcerated men and fathers with reentry programs, services, and resources, including employment, education, child support, and housing. We also push policies around co-parenting and shared parenting. We were instrumental in the Affordable Health Care Act. The fraternity led a national campaign to enroll black men and fathers with health care. Because here's what we know. A healthy father is a better father for his children. The fraternity supported and participated in President Obama's first ever White House convening on men's health. The White House Summit focused on health disparities and support amongst men and fathers. We also supported Julia Carson's Responsible Fatherhood and Healthy Families Act, which was led by Congressman Danny Davis. And in conjunction with Congressman James Clyburn, the fraternity has hosted a call to action fatherhood forum annually during the Congressional Black Caucus. Omega has had many partnerships through the years. Fathers Incorporated out of Atlanta, Georgia, the National Healthy Starts Association Fatherhood Initiative, the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, which was funded by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We've been working with the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore, Maryland. These were just a few of the initiatives that Omega has been involved with through the years. So here's a snapshot of our current program. Omega's purpose, to address the critical challenge of fathers, participation in the lives of children, to families, and the nation's communities. To also focus on the importance of mentoring our next generation of young men and fathers. Our mission statement: work toward closing the gap on fathers' absence, promoting fatherhood, highlighting the necessity of mentoring and the importance of fathers playing an active, responsible role in the lives of their children. At every level of the fraternity, particularly at the chapter level, they are expected to play an active role in engaging activities working with fathers and families. Our 4 tenets of our program are raising awareness, partnership, advocacy, and celebration. Let's skip through this, I know time is of the essence. We got to work in a vacuum. We can't work in a vacuum. Can't work in a vacuum. We must form partnerships. And I'll say this. Omega men recognize that we must share our blessings with others. The Bible is clear. In Mark 25:40, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. If you can walk with kings and not lose the common touch, I ask you today, be a mentor. Encourage a young father. Be their bridge builder. This may be a tall order for some, but not for the men of Omega. Because we were taught Omega men do the difficult with ease, and the impossible takes just a little longer. As I reflect back on at the time, President-elect Joe Biden, he said that he felt like he was fighting for the soul of our nation. So my question to you is this. Who and what are you fighting for? Individually and collectively, who and what are you fighting for? Because I can tell you this, the men of Omega have answered that question. We've decided that we're going to unapologetically, we're going to fight for black boys and fathers, black fathers. That's what we're going to do. We want you to join in the fight with us. I know the sidelines can be comfortable, but as our late John Lewis said, let's get into some good trouble together. That's what I ask for you. I'm going to leave you with this. It may be small to some, but it's big to me. I'm a father of 3. Antoine Martin, Mark Jackson Jr., Lamia Pritchett. Lamia's my goddaughter. I raised her since she was 5 years old. I've enjoyed every experience of fatherhood, from changing diapers to getting robbed by Mickey Mouse down in Florida. I've enjoyed it all. I would not change one thing about my experiences. I think every experience has helped me be the father that I am. Matter of fact, when Mike Long in the back gave me my crib for my son when he was first born. I enjoy fatherhood. To the fathers out there, be there for your kids. Love them unconditionally. That's my advice. That's my request of you. We want you to know that Omega is a trusted partner in this space. We want you to be able to call on us, and we'll be there to answer that call. I thank you for allowing me just to present some few remarks tonight on behalf of our Grand Basileus, Brother Graham Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you again to the brothers of Omega Psi Phi for walking it like you talk it, which is evident by that which we've just heard. So, Brother Jackson, I'm not going to go through your whole biography now, because the people know who you are. But let's give it up again for the first International Vice President of Omega Psi Phi, Dr. Mark. I'm now going to quickly introduce our other panelists who we've been joined by, starting here to my right, Dr. Ivory Tolson, a professor at Howard University. Dr. Tolson is the National Director of Education, Innovation, and Research for the NAACP, Professor of Counseling and Psychology at Howard University, and Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Negro Education. Previously, Dr. Tolson, who many of us knew him during this time, was appointed by President Obama to devise national strategies to sustain and expand federal support on HBCUs as the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. Dr. Ivory Tolson, give it up for them. Seated to his right is Dr. Jay Fagan, Professor Emeritus from Temple University. In the School of Social Work at Temple, and former co-director of the Fatherhood Research and Practice Network, funded by the Administration for Children and Families. His research has focused on at-risk fathers, co-parenting and families, in which mothers and fathers do not live together, family structure effects on young children, parent education, and co-parenting intervention for fathers, fathers in early childhood programs, fathering in the context of family processes, and the relationship between child care and work-family balance among low-income women. Give it up for Dr. Jay Fagan.
And while we're transitioning away from BTS, I know you all might like BTS. We have some seats up in front, so I see a number of people in back, so if you all want to come and sit down.
I'm next going to introduce, and I don't know if y'all have Instagram, but I was excited when I got asked to moderate today, because this is they're all bad brothers and sisters on this, but Glenn Henry. Glenn is an influencer and host of Belief in Fatherhood. Get on social media right now. If you don't follow him, I started following about 7-8 months ago. He is striving to strengthen families before they start. Glenn Belief Henry is giving a tangible look at the often closed-off life of black families, usually sipping toddler tears, and y'all gotta go look at these videos to understand what I'm talking about, and hooking his children up to lie detector tests. His antics are hilariously heartwarming and providing value to many people that call the internet their safe place. Again, go look. It is funny, y'all. It is hilarious. He's doing a wonderful job. Give it up for Glenn Henry. Not to be outdone, there's always a sister that has to be in the work on the panel. I'm pleased to introduce Attorney Jolena Lewis, who is a family court and divorce attorney in the state of New York. She spends her time educating people on what it means to protect children, your assets, in your business. Many of her clients are entrepreneurs who come before her during or after marriage to help them protect that important asset during divorce. You may ask, and this sister wrote a wonderful article not too long ago that talks about what it means as an everyday practitioner with her legal education in the courtroom, and what it means to see fathers, particularly black fathers, who are before the judicial system, and often because they are black, there's a presumption that they are not involved in their child's life. They often receive, and I'll let her explain it, but harsher penalties from a judge because there are black men who's presumed not to be present in their lives, which often leads to higher penalties when it comes to what they have to pay in terms of child support. This is something we've got to reckon with, and it requires real board practitioners, so please give it up for Attorney Lewis. I'm going to get into the questions. I'm going to ask each of them an individual question, and then I'm going to open it up to general questions and then questions to you. I'm going to again begin with Dr. Tolson. Dr. Tolson, if you would, for the audience here to set the stage for this discussion, you wrote an important book, No BS, which BS stands for bad stats. Black people need people who believe in black people enough to believe every bad thing they hear, not to believe everything they hear about black people. I have a two-part question for you. First, can you tell us what we need to know about black fathers, husbands, and partners? Also, one important stat that you cite is about the impact of socioeconomic status on marriage. Can you talk about this and why it's important for black fathers?
Sure. Thank you all so much for having me here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great. All right. And thank you so much, Congresswoman Wilson, for everything that you've done in this space. I've seen you probably for more than a decade, and I'm always inspired by your stories and how you've connected your work in education to what you do now. Very inspiring to me. Also want to thank Dr. Malcolm. My first interaction with Dr. Malcolm was with the Black Doctors Program, the Young Doctors Program, which is a mentoring program that served the community of Washington, D.C. So in my book, No BS, BS for Bad Stats, Black People Need People Who Believe in Black People, not believe every bad thing they hear about black people. That's the subtitle. Author's on the cover of the book. My son is actually the cover model of the book. And in the book, I look at different ways in which stereotypes impact black people, but also how these stereotypes came into existence, and look to see if there's research that backed up a lot of the stereotypes that we hear. One of the stereotypes that we hear quite a bit about black people or black fathers is that their absence is contributing to what we might call an achievement gap. So I did some research on that in the book. One of the things that was very important for me in the book was to get the perspective of children, because a lot of times when we think about stereotypes, and this entire panel discussion is about attacking that stereotype, but a lot of times we think about the impact of that stereotype on adults, on our perceptions, and on the narrative. But children also internalize those things. I think about myself as a child. someone who didn't live in the same house with their father, and was sensitive to all of these notions about the absence of the black father. And I think hearing all of that made things more complicated than it needed to be with my own non-resident father, who was doing the best he could. So these are some of the things that we need to think about. But in terms of looking at the impact of father's presence on the academic success of black males, one of the things I found in my research is that the way that we talk about that far exceeds any evidence from the research. And this is a fundamental flaw with the research. A lot of times researchers, they associate the father being married to the mother in terms of their relationship to the child. In other words, if they aren't married to the mother, there's an assumption that they don't have a good relationship with the child. And the opposite is also true. If they're married to the mother, the assumption is that they have a good relationship with the child. In reality, that's a false narrative. And it's probably even more false when it comes to black communities, where there may be differences in the way that our communities are structured, to where you can more often have black fathers who don't have the traditional relationship with the child's mother, but have a very good relationship with the child. You mentioned the stats about income and marriage. One of the things I found in my research is that, and this is consistent with what we know, marriage patterns among black people are lower than in other race groups. There are some characteristics that are common across all race groups that lessen the probability that you'll be married. So regardless of your race, if you have a lower socioeconomic status, you're less likely to be married, lower education, and urban areas. And we can get into the reasons for that. That's far beyond the scope of this panel. But one of the things that's important, again, when a father isn't married to the mother, we tend to assume things that aren't true. Because there are less black fathers married to the child's mother, that becomes a generalization that impacts how we perceive their ability to be a father. But one of the things that we've learned from the more recent studies, including the studies of Dr. Fagan and the studies that you all cited, is that oftentimes, even though your income may reduce the probability that you are married, it may increase the probability that you'll spend more time. So there are two fundamental things that we can offer as a father. We can offer our money and we can offer our time. And perhaps if you have less money to offer, then, and you still want to be a good father, you have more of a motive to spend more time. And oftentimes that time is more important than the money. So these are some of the things that are important for us to understand in the context of this conversation we're having right now. Thank you.
Dr. Fagan, I want to turn to you. You're a noted academic, spent many years in the academy, contributing to your scholarship on black fathers. You have a 2023 publication that I know you're going to talk to us about in the peer-reviewed journal, periodical journal of Family Issues, entitled "The Myth of Low-Income Black Fathers: Absence from the Lives of Adolescents." Can you walk us to that, what that study, and what your scholarship has been focused on? Yes, and I'm going to play, I'm going to press the button for you, okay, so you don't have to do it. Okay. If I'm doing it correctly.
All right, can you hear me?
Press the button in front of us.
I want to thank Congresswoman Wilson and Dr. Woodland for inviting me. Very glad to be here. I don't know how to present something with a PowerPoint. That's what academics do. They always put PowerPoints up. But just to tell you a little bit about some of the research that I've been doing. I've been doing fatherhood research now for over 30 years. That's really been my area of interest and expertise. Started out doing research with Head Start fathers, adolescent fathers. I've run programs for both of those groups and done evaluations. And I've also been following for quite some time the studies on black fathers and noticing that they pretty uniformly find that black fathers are equally, if not more involved than their counterparts, than fathers from other racial ethnic groups. But there were some gaps in the research that I have also noticed and that I thought were important to address. Again, researchers are always looking for gaps to fill in studies. And one of those gaps is that most of the studies are based on either middle-income fathers, black fathers, or fathers across nationally representative samples of fathers, so fathers across the socioeconomic spectrum. Another gap is that the studies often ask fathers and mothers to self-report, to report about their own perceptions of how involved they are with their children. There's some issues with that. Fathers tend to over-report how involved they are with their kids, and mothers tend to under-report how involved fathers are with kids. So I wanted to try to find a sample, as Dr. Tolson was saying, to see what children are saying. Another gap is that, as I'm saying now, children's perceptions are often not obtained. Very important to note how children perceive their relationships with their fathers. Those perceptions are more closely tied to child outcomes and how children are doing. I mean, think about it. If a child doesn't perceive his father to be involved with him, to be a caring, close person, it may not be he may not be someone who's having a positive effect on him. And the other thing is that many of the studies have addressed quantity of involvement, how involved the father is rather than the quality of his involvement. And we know from many child outcome studies that quality is more important than quantity, although quality without some involvement is also meaningless. So the research question that I addressed in this study that has been referenced today is, do low-income adolescent perceptions of involvement with fathers vary by race and ethnicity? And I used a data set called the Fragile Families and Child Wellbeing Study. It's a wonderful data set. There were 5,000 families that were interviewed starting in the year 2000, and all the families were from urban settings, from the representative of urban cities in the United States. And those families have been followed now for 21 years. So I was looking at the 15-year follow-up, so the follow-up of adolescents at age 15. And the adolescents were asked, this was a sample of youth, 15-year-olds, about half of them were black, 20% white, 20% Hispanic, and about 8% other, majority low income, and they were asked, how close do you feel to your father? And the second question they were asked is, how easy is it for you to talk to your father about things that are important to you? They were asked the same questions of their mother as well. And then there were a series of questions they were asked about how involved they are, how involved their parents are. Do they take them to activities? Do they help with homework? Do they talk to them every day? Those kinds of questions. So just to quickly get to the results and then move on. What the study showed was that, first of all, across all the racial ethnic groups, the youth said that they feel quite close to their fathers. And secondly, they said that they only sometimes interact with their fathers. So there was a fairly low level of amount of interaction that they reported. The other main finding that I want to share today is there was no difference across the racial ethnic groups in how close the youth felt with their fathers, and how often they felt that they perceived interacting with their fathers. So across these four racial ethnic groups, there were no differences, no significant differences. Now this was after accounting. We talk about controlling for variables, so controlling for whether they live together with the father or not, father's education, no differences in amount of closeness or how often they interacted. Now, there was a difference by residence. So fathers who did not live with their children, the youth reported feeling less close to them, and that was true for all the racial ethnic groups. So within both resident and non-resident families, there were no racial ethnic differences. Now, why is this important? Next slide, just very quickly. I also have another paper that I recently published looking at what are the outcomes for children when they report how close they are to their fathers. And what I found was how close they feel both to fathers and mothers at age 9 predicts whether they have depression at age 15. So depression was higher when the youth at age 9 were reporting that they felt less close to their fathers, also less close to their mothers. And that was after accounting for many, many kinds of issues, such as did the parents have depression, were the children depressed when they were younger, were the parents, did they interact harshly with their children? After taking into account all those things, all those kinds of variables, how close the youth felt to their fathers predicted whether they were depressed or not. Let me stop there.
Thank you for that. Brother Jackson, you walked us through the high levels of what Omega Psi-Phi is doing. I think it might be helpful and instructive for folks. What does that look like on the ground in communities? What is Omega Psi-Phi doing to change the narrative around Black men and boys and the communities we all live in?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Again, Mark Jackson here. So Omega has been in this space for quite some time, and actually our mentoring program is probably the most recognizable in the country. Is our Omega Lamplighters program, and so we have throughout Omega, we have chapters like our Omega chapter here in Washington D.C. and Kappa Psi chapter here in Washington D.C. who has a group of boys that they work with on a continuous basis. And they teach them everything from A to Z. And what Brother Clyburn mentioned earlier is really just opening up that level of communication. But it's that consistent outreach to them. It's that consistent being there for them to see what their needs are and try to meet them with their needs. And what we found across the country is when we do that, kids will open up to you. They will tell you some things before they even tell their parents. And so it's just us trying to stand in the gap. That's what Omega Men does. We stand in the gap between the haves and the have-nots. We're trying to be a disruptor. You heard all those stats earlier about fathers not being there. Well, we're trying to disrupt. We're trying to be a disruptor to some of those stats. And so what it looks like from us is us, each one bringing one, us wrapping our hands around these young Black boys, encouraging young men to be great fathers, and being there for them as well. We created programs like Brother, You Are On My Mind, because we recognize too that what goes wrong with fatherhood sometimes is that mental stress piece as well. And so we encourage on Wednesdays, we encourage brothers to call a brother, check on him, see how he's doing. Does he need some help? You know, we don't call to borrow $50. We call and say, hey brother, how can I help you? You know, and so we know that mental illness or mental stress piece goes wrong with being a father too. And again, we tell people, hey, especially on our college campus, our brothers, we say, hey, you don't have to do something real big. Start small. Go into some of the inner city schools. Like we have a program that we do during Dr. Seuss, like I mentioned earlier, we were in the room. Dr. Seuss's birthday, right? You know, Cat in the Hat. Well, we go and read to kids. Black men go into schools and read to kids during Dr. Seuss's birthday. Just you can imagine the impact of that. We encourage our young brothers to go into schools and be part of the PTA, to create that public awareness, constantly say, read to your kids at night. We have a number of programs that we promote. I would ask you to look on to our social media. You can just Google Omega Psi-Phi Fatherhood and Mentoring. We publish a quarterly newsletter where we celebrate father. We celebrate and honor fatherhood. That's what we do. That's the space that we're in.
Brother Henry, you are tackling the narrative from a unique perspective and in a unique way. through your belief in fatherhood. My question is two-part for you. One, what was your inspiration that led you to, you got, I think, over 2.5 million followers in your social media platforms, which is a major platform. So what was your one inspiration, and what has success looked like for you? How are you measuring how successful your outreach and work has been?
I'm very grateful to be here, so thank you for having me. I started out making videos on my iPhone and broken iPhones because I couldn't afford a camera, and now I'm the CEO of a media company. I'm on these life fatherhood. So I came a long way to be here. I'm just grateful. But I would say there isn't one inspiration, it's many. The fact that I stepped into fatherhood and I couldn't believe what I was seeing and experiencing, and there was no example of how I was supposed to feel. I just felt blind walking into it. And, you know, there was just, well, my wife asked me to be the stay-at-home father in a portion of our, she was making more money than me, basically, you know. She was like, look, we're paying a lot for childcare, this is expensive, why don't you stay home and raise our boys, and, you know, it would be great to see what love looks like coming from a man. And I thought it was gonna be a waste of my time, to be honest. I was like, it's gonna be boring, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I said, okay, you know, and I couldn't make money from home because I was doing music, and then I think one weekend I was crying in the mirror because I couldn't believe how emotionally exhausted I was caring for two young boys. Now, over the year, I realized how much they taught me, not how much I was teaching them. They taught me lessons about time, they taught me lessons about generosity, caring. They were just so intelligent as babies because all they did was focus on the necessities. They didn't care about anything, they just cared about me, and whether I was present or not. And I realized one key thing, that who I married was the most important decision I would ever make. But how I raise my children would be the most impactful relationships I ever build. It will last longer than I will, my name will, anything. How you raise your children, that is the greatest asset you'll ever have. And so, once I realized that, I decided that I didn't want to be, I didn't want to go through this alone and have other men walk through it blind. I wanted them to know what it felt like. So I decided that I didn't want to be a dad until I saw proof, so I wanted to be proof for other people. And I was just going to share my life. And I was just going to open the door, and whoever wanted to look through, they could. And I got a lot of, you know, feedback. People were saying, you know, I never wanted to be a father until I saw this thing. I hadn't talked to my father in 8 years, and because I watched this video, I'm going to give him a call, thank you. And so, what I didn't realize, I was getting into the industry of reconciliation, which is something that we don't even think about. We don't necessarily think about sharing our experiences because we, as people, want to keep things private to protect it. But if you do not share it, no one wins. So, I decided to share my life, and it was very risky, it's very vulnerable, it's not easy, but it is something I feel like I'm called to, and I wouldn't want to do.
Now, Clint, you have to tell people, where do they find you? What is the handle, so that we can go watch these videos and see the work that you're doing?
Right, so beliefinfatherhood.com is basically where you can find everything. I have a YouTube channel called Belief in Fatherhood, on TikTok, it's Belief in Fatherhood, Instagram, everything. you have to be everywhere. But we just started an initiative called Belief in Good, which is where we're just good people doing good work, and every Sunday, starting this past Father's Day, I've been highlighting good fathers, just regular dads in the community who may just need their story out there. The most important thing that we have to understand is if we want to see change anywhere, we have to tell great stories. Every testimony, every gospel, everything is from a story, right? We tell those stories, and those stories become movies and books, but they all start with someone, a protagonist, going through something. And so if we can tell great stories, I believe we can change the narrative. I believe we can really change media, because that's what I feel like we're about.
Attorney Lewis, first of all, let me thank you. I know it's a commitment to take time from your practice and the families that you are defending every day. In a real way, you're a real practitioner, litigating in a courtroom every day. When you go in there, there's a certain set of ways in which you have to comport yourself and fight for these issues. We've heard some of the statistics here today, but can you talk about the stereotypes and what you facing a judge and other attorneys every day, what you're seeing in your profession, and frankly, how the court system, how it has been, are there any hopes for the future in the way you're tackling these issues, or are you not optimistic?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak, Congresswoman Wilson. I'm a huge fan. I'm very excited to be here. And this is really a topic that I'm very passionate about. I represent fathers, mostly Black fathers, every single day. This is what I do day in and out in family court and divorce court and with child support cases. I will say that, again, the biggest stereotype that Black fathers face in the court system is this myth that Black fathers are absent, Black fathers are not involved. So when it comes to something like child custody, the court really puts a great, balance on if a parent is really involved, if the parent is the primary caretaker, how much time, when they're deciding a custody case, they'll look at how much time each parent is spending with the child. When you're a Black father, you're coming into the courtroom, there's already an assumption that you're not there. They're basing it off of that fact, and especially if you do not have legal representation, a lot of fathers go into the courthouse representing themselves because hiring an attorney is extraordinarily expensive. It's really expensive for the average person to do. They might not even get a chance to speak. They might not even get a chance to tell the court their relationship with their child. And they're relegated to just seeing their child once or twice a month because that's what dads get. That's what Black dads get. And I get Black fathers who come to me who are just demoralized. They go from seeing their children every day, spending time with them, being very involved in their lives. If they break up with their partner or divorce their spouse, all of a sudden, they don't get to see their kids at all, or only 1 or 2 days, a month. And it's a really hopeless feeling when you go from that. And it's definitely a myth. I know that we talked about that 2013 CDC study, which I think is very important to consider, that Black fathers are more involved, whether or not they live in the house with the children, even if it's not their biological children. So Black stepdads, boyfriends, even just other members of the community at large, they are more involved with the children day to day than fathers of other races. And the issue is the bias and the people involved. So the law itself is not necessarily biased against fathers. It's the people, it's the judges, it's the other attorneys, it's the other litigants. And it's really hard to really fight and push hard when you're hearing from everyone that, fathers just don't get this kind of time. Fathers just don't get this type of custody. And this becomes an issue with child support as well, because the person who pays child support is the person who's not the custodial parent. If you don't even have a fair opportunity to even be the custodial parent, you're gonna be the one paying child support. And you know what's gonna happen is you're gonna have to work more so you can pay that child support, and then you're gonna spend less time with your children. So it's a pretty vicious cycle. I know one of my co-panelists here in his book said Black people need Black people. I think that is important. I think it makes a huge difference when there are more Black judges, when there are more Black attorneys, because they are less likely to have this bias from the beginning. And I think that when I appear before Black judges, they're more fair to the Black fathers in the situation, to all fathers, really. And Black attorneys as well. I think it's helpful to have people from the community that understand where Black fathers are coming from and really understand how our community works, because it is, like that study showed, that even non-biological people are involved. It does take a village, and I feel like Black people do, live by that. And I think that that's something that's important to consider when you're considering, which parent should have custody or how time should be divided. I also agree with my colleague that said we must work in partnerships. So I think it's important that, I was talking to these guys earlier, there aren't a lot of resources for Black fathers. So for mothers, you can get legal advice. There's programs that help you with that. There's programs to help you through the process. Maybe you get discounted or free legal services. Those programs don't really exist for fathers. There's really not a ton of places that they can turn to for that kind of help. And I think a lot of Black fathers get into trouble because they don't know the law, they don't know what to expect, they don't know what they need to do. Just having that information from the beginning can help them make decisions, to give them a better opportunity to get a lower amount of child support, or to actually get custody of their children. And a lot of times, you know, just facing all of this, it can be frustrating. And a lot of dads do give up, like, I'm not gonna get custody anyways, I'm not gonna see my kids anyways, they just want me to pay child support and that's it. So they give up. And that's not good for our children. That's not good for the children in our community. Children need both parents to be involved, when it's healthy for both parents to be involved. And I think that we need to come from a place where, you know, when parents come into the courthouse, they have an equal opportunity. So I don't think that all is lost. I don't think that this is something that, I think that this is something that we can improve on. Like I said, having more Black litigators, having more Black judges makes a huge difference. And I think that if we can get more resources and more information, that will help. And, you know, in that article, you know, it was kind of aimed towards other litigators. We need to advocate for the Black fathers that we represent. We have to push back. If there is a judge who is showing bias, you have to fight back against that. You have to push hard against that. If there's an unfair ruling, you have to appeal that ruling. You have to be loud. You have to be the squeaky wheel, because otherwise they'll run over you. And that's why I think it's important for fathers to have representation so that they can actually have a voice. Because the judge is not gonna listen to them on their own if they don't have, you know, an advocate for them, advocating, you know, strong for them.
Thank you. I'm taking notes, Congresswoman. We need to call it the Bar Association. We got a bill we need to file, because we need a resource for fathers. Thank you. You come on to Congress, you might be able to get into some bills, so thank you. That is helpful. I want to open it up for everybody. I want to start off with the first question myself, and then have others chime in. Any one of you can answer this, or a multitude of you. The stereotypes that you just talked about, Attorney Lewis, they have a physical and mental health effect, particularly on Black men. I would like for maybe one or two of you to speak to what you have found in your work and your studies that looks like. Somebody.
Well, I'll reiterate that in my practice, the mental health, like, it is very, it just feels hopeless. And it's really hard to be a good father when you feel like everybody is against you and you're not gonna have the opportunity to be the father that you want to be. And it's difficult. I don't think that people fully appreciate how it feels to be involved in your child's life and just be completely ripped away. I mean, that's core on the father's mental health and the children's. So I think that people don't really take that into consideration, and I'm always calling out judges on that and other parties on that. Like, you know, dad has feelings too, like he matters. How he feels matters. And it's a huge difference to have that taken away from you, that quality relationship that you have with your children.
Yeah, and I work with a parent cooperation program, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I've worked with a parent cooperation program for about 5 years for DC courts. And so I worked with parents who were going through a mitigation process as opposed to, you know, having the attorneys. And we really had to work with them to try to convince them that it's better for them to sit down together and cooperate and try to come up with an agreement than try to tear each other apart in court. And a lot of them would come with their boxing gloves on. You know, like they wanted that feeling, that adrenaline rush of being in the court and talking about all the bad things about the other parent and calling the parent crazy so they can go through a psychological evaluation, and calling the other parent a crook so they can go to jail, all these types of things. But one of the things, I think about the story in the Bible where they had two women that were claiming the same child, and the judge said, I'm just gonna cut the baby in half and give you half, another a half. And there was a one that said, no, I want the baby to be whole. That was the real mother. And when we think about this process of going to court, you really are splitting your child in half. And you have, and going through a divorce, or having parents that went through a divorce myself, I know how when you have that joint custody situation for a very contentious divorce, and prior to that, my parents became very good cooperative parents eventually. But early on, they were fighting really, really bad, and they took that fight to court, and they had this split decision, and I really did feel like a child being cut in half. You know, the split decision just didn't work that well with our schedules. We were, just being shuffled around And we kind of seem like an afterthought. So we really do have to think about, as you said, think about the children in this. There's sacrifices that has to be made, but if you really love the child, you're willing to make those sacrifices.
So, yes, the stereotypes are really very pervasive throughout society, and take its toll on black men and black women's mental health and children as well. But I do want to point out that these biases are very prevalent in human services as well, in child welfare, in children and family services, in school systems, Head Start. I know, having spent many years involved with Head Start, Head Start staff, teachers would often say, fathers are not interested. And these were Head Start programs in Philadelphia and black communities in Philadelphia. I've done research in OBGYN clinics where we were recruiting young fathers, the nursing staff there would say, fathers never come to their children. Fathers were sitting in the waiting room. They just were kind of invisible. Nobody bothered to approach them. So it's very prevalent in child welfare as well. There is a big effort right now around the country to try to make some changes in human services to make these programs, these social service programs and education programs more father friendly. It's an uphill battle. It's not an easy thing to accomplish.
Anybody else have questions? I want to open it up for folks that may, sir, please, microphone, if I do something.
Hi, my name is Jeff Candy. I was a 33-year teacher at the District of Columbia, and early childhood Head Start for quite a few years. And at every level, that opportunity to work almost at every level as addicts, as an advocate, as an organizer. The nexus, the challenge of being Black father in American society, the things that Black fathers have to go through. I was just reminded in the back that fathers, if you marry, you get an income tax. You have to pay a higher rate of income tax. The things that are placed in the way systematically in American society around making sure that Black men are not fathers are still in place. And if we take a systematic approach to the history of why that has occurred, then I think you could make a lot of movement for the next generation. And I think those are very important. So my question is going to go to Ari, who I'm very familiar with it, and he's very familiar with me. Can you talk a little bit about the issue of something you're very familiar with as far as standardized testing with children and what that long-term effect does for children and families?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and thank you for your advocacy. So the standardized, or the testing industry, which has its origins in the eugenics movement. Some of the earliest IQ examinations were developed by those who stated that they were eugenicists, that wanted to reduce births among certain populations and increase them among others. Our standardized testings have always had that history, and so we do need to, we can't really separate that history from the ways in which they are used right now. So we understand how they're used in the context of education, but also in custody battles, where we're using these types of tests, tests that have these cultural biases, and tests that are administered within a context that produces a lot of error and the test takers, both the parents that often have to take them, because parents often have to take IQ examinations when they're going through a custody battle. If there's an accusation, not just IQ, but personality assessments and things like that. So we do have to look at, I think it is important to consider some of these tests in the context of how they're used to separate families rather than make them whole.
Further questions? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for all your inspiring words. I'm coming from a public health background in the space of maternal child health. And I know that in our space, we almost have to fight tooth and nail for every dollar of funding for these programs. Is there any recommendations to advocating for more funding and for programs that support Black men and Black fathers? I think when it comes to, like I was saying before about story, right? I think the things that the outcome of the initiatives that we have should be documented so that people can get behind it, right? So, like right now, we are funding a lot of support for, because a lot of the people that you guys might be wanting to mentor, they're in my emails. They need representation, they need law, they need all types of help. And the reason why they come to me is because there's no one else. But if we can fully document the outcome that we desire and tell that story over and over and over again, and it doesn't have to be on social media, but it helps. I think that's how we can bring more funds and change that.
Yeah, and it is pretty absurd that a professor at Georgetown can get a $2 million grant to study fathers, and community activists like yourself that's doing the work can't get a $20,000 grant. And, you know, when we look at how the federal government is spending money on issues, they're putting so much in research, and we're researching the same thing over and over and over again. And you have entire laboratories and industries that's developed over research when there are people that, like you, that need the funding, is not being able to get it. But one thing I would say on a practical matter is public how research dollars are being distributed. So look at how Health and Human Services and some of the large grant organizations see what Fatherhood programs there are, research programs they are funding. Find the professors who are doing that work, or the researchers that's doing that work, let them know about your program and try to develop some partnerships in that area. And, you know, I always talk about the importance of community participatory research. We need to build bridges between community activists and people who are doing the work and the researchers. And researchers shouldn't just be hiding in the ivory tower and not working with people like you. But there are ways to find these people. And so, you know, talk to the professors at Howard, Georgetown, George Washington, American, and tell them what you're doing and find a way to partner. And I think you'll probably be able to find some funding that way.
Yeah, so just to address that point, you know, the federal government now spends, I think it's $150 million a year for fatherhood programs around the country, but those funds are largely going to, I believe it's 30 some odd programs in the U.S. at this time. And there's some folks who feel that it would be much better if those monies were it was more decentralized, if those monies were distributed to the states and the states were allowed to determine where the need is for fatherhood programs. So there are quite a few fatherhood advocates now who are pushing for that. The other thing is that, you know, fatherhood programs at the state level are not really at the table. Okay, they're not really at the table in terms of policy development and you know, policy advocacy. There are some states that have developed fatherhood commissions. Ohio is one of them. Pennsylvania has just started a fatherhood commission. And what that does is that it makes fatherhood programs equivalent to child welfare, to the other children and family services, so that when planning is done, the fatherhood services have to be taken into account. There's somebody at the table. What that takes is having a champion, in a legislative champion in those states who really gets behind this kind of effort. So I don't know if that's helpful. It's really it's hard work.
And I'm just gonna piggyback on that. And let's just be honest. Some municipalities have just given up. They've raised their hand to say that I'm not gonna put money into prevention. I'll get it on the back end. So they'll build more jails. That's what a profit is. I mean, if we're gonna call a spade, let's talk about it. Some municipalities have decided that, you know what, the problem is just too large for us. We're not gonna deal with it on that end. We're gonna deal with it on the other end. And so that's why you need these champions, if you will, to be out there saying, no, we're not gonna stand for this. We want funding to be put up. You can only slice the pie for so many ways. And if you don't have somebody there saying that, hey, we need a slice of that pie over here to take care of fatherhood programs, mentoring programs, if you don't have that champion, your slice of pie becomes smaller at each budget cycle until it's gone. And so it's incumbent upon organizations like ours to stay in fine tune with fine legislators like Congressman Wilson to see when they're passing legislation to see where the money is. So now we know that it's been passed, now we gotta figure out how we go get it. That's what we have to do. But I didn't want to leave here and not be frank with you. Some states, some cities have just decided that the problem is just too big and we're not going to do the prevention piece. We'd rather take it on the end because there's more money there. There's more money in building jails. More money in providing meals. More money in providing uniforms.
Two final questions, the gentleman here and the gentleman right here. The gentleman here first and then you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Reed Jr. I am a third-year PhD student in Education Policy and Planning at the University of Texas at Austin. And I wanted to ask that in this post-truth era of hyper-partisan politics, and where more Americans are believing that truth is more subjective these days, do you have any advice on how to best translate critical data and research on Black men, boys, fathers to more effective advocacy that can be leveraged for policy change, whether on the state or federal level? Thank you.
Yeah, well, in many ways, truth is subjective. And I think that having more research that's translated, because for a long time, we've considered research to be, or good research to be objective. In many ways, we still do. But we've denied the inherent biases that was in the research. And so you have people saying that, saying that it's objective research because it's quantitative, but they have an educated guess of a hypothesis. So you can't guess and be objective at the same time. But the most important thing is for attitudes and belief systems to change. And it's not necessarily the research that changes it. A lot of times it's more of the narrative, the stories. And then once you have the story right, and once that's why belief in fatherhood is so important. Belief in fatherhood is more important than the research in a lot of ways. Because when people see his videos, they're more likely to believe my research. Because a lot of times, when I first started doing research, saying that Black boys weren't at a natural disadvantage just because they were in a single parent household, there were people, mostly Black people, who was calling me to task. All of a sudden, they wanted to really dig into my research. They became these methodologists when you had mostly white researchers telling them the worst things about Black people, and they never challenged it. So it really is our belief systems that need to be changed, and once we change the belief systems with the stories, then you can get good research out there, good research like mine, good research like Dr. Fagan's, and people will be more susceptible to it.
Yeah, you know, and psychologists talk about this idea of biased memory. Actually, an article in the New York Times yesterday about this. And what that says is that people will, over time, will forget negative things, but they'll remember positive things. They'll remember positive stories, right? It's sort of like, you know, when someone delivers a baby and it's really painful, after a while, they forget how painful it was, but the things that they remember about their children are the positive things. And so I think that to me, it's an instructive kind of idea or concept in the sense that the more positive stories that are told about how Black fathers are involved with their children, how they do care for their kids, that will make a difference over time. Of course, it takes a lot of time for that to happen. But the concept is called biased memory.
All right, two final questions. I'm gonna take you both at the same time to ask your questions. You first, then you, and then our panelists will respond to kind of go.
Cap, I want to thank the panelists and especially Congressman Wilson for organizing this event. So my question is there any current legislation or proposed legislation that would provide capacity building grants to community-based organizations that are trying to break the cycles of mass incarceration amongst Black men and boys and focus on supporting fatherhood initiatives? And the second part of that is, if they do exist, are there avenues for these organizations to then direct fathers to entrepreneurial loans, vocational job training that can elevate the economic status of the fathers and potentially their sons and daughters?
Okay, and brother, I'm gonna take your question as well at the same time, and then we'll respond. Paul.
Good afternoon. First, thank you, Congresswoman Wilson and panel for this such an important event. Tony O.T. here, I'm a retired service member, Black father, Black stepfather. And keeping with the theme of subjectivity, having my career, having taken me across the world, we know that parenting is measured in standard of success differently upon, different countries, cultures, different socioeconomic demographics. So I'll be interested in any panelists to answer this. Here, what does successful Black fathering in this state look like to you? How do you measure that? As I prepare my sons, as they become of age to be Black fathers, and we have those conversations, and what I feel was successful may not necessarily be the blueprint for success as we know it. So I'd be interested to hear, what does that look like to you?
So first, legislation or programs, as you mentioned, Dr. Fagan, in Ohio, where they just started the commission, are there other apparatuses or legislation here in the Congress? Two, organizations in directing fathers to where those resources are, and then three, how are we measuring a successful Black father? Anybody who wants to answer any of those?
Well, if you want immediate support, I wouldn't look at legislation because it takes too long for legislation to actually become law. You should look at the agencies and look at the grants that already exist. So go to grants.gov and put in the keywords and then start building a relationship in the agency, because there's billions of dollars that has already been approved for different types of initiatives. But it is a process to get the right kind of connections and the right team together to get that funding. So that's what I would suggest. Go to grants.gov and then start networking with the agencies.
Yeah, so the federal government's funding of responsible fatherhood programs, I think we have some, the commissioner from HHS here. But anyway, the responsible fatherhood programs, they do include, they require programs to provide vocational workplace, not workplace, job preparation. So fathers who are part of, who join responsible fatherhood programs do participate in vocational types of, usually just job readiness. They're not very extensive skill development. I don't know of any programs, however, that offer entrepreneurial, development. I'm not aware of. I don't believe that the responsible fatherhood programs support that. So that's where most of that funding comes from. As far as capacity building, I don't think that the federal government does support capacity building at this time. I have to check on that, but I don't believe that they're doing it.
In response to the question about the success, I would say that when I first went out, I was interviewing my dad. I walked around and I called every dad I knew and I asked them what was the most important thing that they taught their children. And they had there was a variety of different answers, and I don't think we can ask that in a generalizing way. I think it's individual. Each father has their own success. But I do know that for me, I would say that I want to be able to teach my children everything I know, but most of all, I want them to not fear everything I fear. I want them not to walk into the world once they leave or whenever they choose to move on from the house, believing everything I believe because I know that I am a trauma survivor. And so if I can teach them that their joy is a right, then that is success for me. But I think that it's individual. I don't think we can say that every black father has the same level of success or making.
Also, I would say this on the successful parenting piece. Folks will say there's no magic formula to raising kids, and I always push back on that notion. Because the Bible says you train up a child in the way that he's supposed to go, and when he gets old, he won't depart from it. And so if you believe in the Bible, I certainly do. That's the way I try to train my kids. So what successful parent looks like to me, that my kids are respectful to women, they're respectful to their mom, they get up and do their chores around the house, they graduate on time, they come back home when they're supposed to come back home. I don't get calls from the school to come, check on your child. I mean, just basic stuff. I will leave you with this, because of course I gotta catch a flight here in about an hour and a half. I will leave you with this. A couple weeks ago was Men's Day at my church, and I'm driving up to the church, and I pull in front, let my wife out, and I figured I'm not gonna have her walk in the parking lot till it's raining. So I let her out, and I'm assuming my son's gonna get out with her. And he said, Dad, I'm going with you to the parking lot. I'm walking in with you, because it's dead this day. It may be small to some folk, but that tug in my heart. It just lets me know that somewhere along the way, he may be getting it. He may be getting it. Thank you.
Sounds like the future too. Y'all give it up for this panel. Let me invite back up to the podium our leader, Congresswoman Frederica.
Yes, black. Let's give it up for Dr. Attorney Reverend Miss Evans, Executive Director of the wonderful job. I'm so proud to welcome you into the 5,000 room. I was into all of you who wear the red ties. Welcome into the room. Now we're going to honor the members from Omega Psi Phi fraternity. I want to thank them for coming today. And we have the Basileus of the local chapter here, Mr. Frank Boris. Would you please come forward, Mr. Boris? Really, Mr. Boris was quite me whether he should put on a red tie or did I have a proper tie for him. So you have to let him know that all of the Omegas, including my son and son-in-law in Miami-Dade County and all across Florida, are members of the 5,000 role models of excellence, and they wear the red tie with pride.
I will start the tradition of wearing the red tie with pride here in DC.
Only for her, red only for her.
Okay, so read what's on the, you want to read it?
Certificate of Congressional Recognition to Omega Psi Phi Alpha Chapter. Alpha Omega Chapter.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jackson, while you're standing for the national.
Thank you. And this says, Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition presented to Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, signed by Congresswoman Frederica S.
Thank you so much for coming, our panelists. Thank you. You are absolutely